Left alone at the airport, she never expected to board a private jet with a Romanian mobster. Before we dive into the story, tell me where in the world you're watching from. And if this story steals your heart, please hit subscribe. The announcement chime dinged with a hollow, metallic finality that seemed to echo inside Emily's chest, vibrating against her ribs before the voice even began to speak. It was the sound of failure. The automated voice over the intercom was not apologetic, merely factual, as it declared that all flights out of Zurich International Airport were grounded indefinitely due to the historic blizzard hammering the Alps. Emily Thorne stood frozen in the middle of Terminal B, her grip tightening on the handle of her worn leather travel bag until her knuckles turned the color of old parchment. Around her, the collective groan of 2,000 stranded passengers rose like a physical wave, a cacophony of crying infants, shouting businessmen, and the frantic tapping of smartphone screens. But Emily did not scream. She did not cry. She simply stared at the departure board as the cascade of red canceled text wiped away her last chance at redemption. She was 26 years old, and she was entirely out of options. The investigative piece she had been chasing, a story about money laundering in the Swiss banking sector, had fallen apart an hour ago when her source ghosted her. Her editor back in London had made it clear that without the interview, she didn't have a job to return to. Now, she had no hotel reservation, less than 50 Swiss francs in her bank account, and the battery on her phone was flashing a critical red warning. The airport hotels were undoubtedly booked solid by the business-class passengers who had platinum cards and assistants to manage these crises. Emily pulled her beige trench coat tighter around herself, trying to ward off the chill that seemed to seep in from the sliding glass doors, which were currently blocked by a wall of white snow. She felt small, invisible, and overwhelmingly defeated. It was in this moment of quiet desperation that she felt eyes on her. It was not the casual glance of a passerby, but a heavy, tangible weight that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She turned slowly, scanning the VIP lounge entrance near where she was standing. A man was watching her. He stood on the other side of the velvet rope, separated from the chaos of the general terminal by glass and privilege. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal three-piece suit that fit his broad frame with the precision of armor. He held a tumbler of amber liquid in one hand, his posture relaxed but alert, like a panther resting in a tree. His hair was dark, slicked back from a face that was composed of sharp angles and hard lines, and his eyes were a piercing steel gray that seemed to strip away the noise of the airport and focus solely on her. He signaled to a massive bodyguard standing near the lounge entrance, whispering a few words without breaking eye contact with Emily. The guard nodded and approached her, cutting through the crowd like an icebreaker ship. Emily took a step back, her instinct for self-preservation flaring, but the guard stopped at a respectful distance. He spoke in a deep, gravelly voice, his English heavily accented. "Mr. Ionescu invites you to join him in the lounge. Miss, he believes you look like you could use a drink, and perhaps a solution to your travel problem." Emily looked from the guard to the man in the suit, Adrian Ionescu. The name sounded familiar, perhaps something from the financial pages, or perhaps something darker. She hesitated, knowing that accepting invitations from strange men in airports was the first chapter of a cautionary tale, but the cold draft from the doors bit at her ankles, and the hopelessness of her situation weighed heavier than her fear. She nodded, smoothing her hair, and followed the guard past the velvet rope. Up close, Adrian Ionescu was devastating. He was older than her, perhaps in his mid-30s, with a faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow that saved his face from being too perfect. He did not smile when she approached. He simply gestured to the leather armchair opposite him. "You look like you have lost a war," he said, his voice a low baritone that vibrated with power. His accent was Eastern European, thick and rolling, wrapping around the vowels in a way that sounded both elegant and dangerous. "I have a jet leaving for Bucharest in 40 minutes. My pilots are used to flying in worse weather than this. If you need to get east, you are welcome to a seat." Emily blinked, stunned by the casual offer of a private flight when commercial airliners were grounded. "Why would you do that?" she asked, her journalist instincts finally flickering to life. He took a slow sip of his drink. "Because I dislike wasted potential, and because sitting alone in a G650 is boring." Panic and pride warred within her. She could not admit she was broke and homeless in Zurich. She needed to be someone who belonged in that jet, someone who wasn't a victim. She straightened her spine, lifting her chin. That is very generous, Mr. Ionescu. I actually have to get to Bucharest. My fiancé is meeting me there. He is a diplomat, very important. I would hate to worry him by being stuck here. It was a lie, a clumsy shield constructed to tell him that she was spoken for, that she had protection, that she wasn't just a stray cat he could pick up. Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of amusement dancing in their gray depths. He knew. She was certain he knew she was lying, but he didn't call her out. Instead, he stood up, buttoning his suit jacket with a fluid motion. Then we must not keep the diplomat waiting. Come. My car is on the tarmac. The interior of the Gulfstream G650 was a different world entirely, separated from the biting cold and the smell of wet wool that permeated the terminal. Here, the air was scented with expensive leather and sandalwood. The cabin was bathed in low, amber lighting that reflected off the polished mahogany tables. There were no rows of cramped seats, only expansive cream-colored leather recliners that looked more comfortable than any bed Emily had slept in for months. Adrian gestured for her to take the seat opposite him, and as she sank into the plush material, she felt a profound sense of imposter syndrome wash over her. She gripped her battered bag in her lap, afraid to let it touch the pristine floor. The engines whined to life, a distant hum that barely penetrated the soundproofing, and the plane began to taxi. Adrian poured 2 glasses of scotch from a crystal decanter, sliding one across the table toward her without asking if she wanted it. He watched her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. So, he began, crossing his long legs, his polished Oxford shoes gleaming under the lights. Tell me about this diplomat fiancé of yours. He must be a powerful man to command such loyalty that you would board a stranger's jet into a blizzard just to see him. Emily took a sip of the alcohol, the burns settling her nerves. He is. He works for the embassy. We have been together for 2 years. She was improvising, spinning a web that felt increasingly fragile under his scrutiny. Adrian swirled his glass, his gaze dropping to her ring finger, which was bare. A modern couple, I see. No ring. Before she could invent an excuse, the jet lurched violently. The smooth hum of the engines turned into a roar as the plane ascended into the heart of the storm. The cabin shook, the crystal glasses rattling against the table. Emily gasped, her hands flying out to grip the armrests as the plane dropped suddenly, the sensation of weightlessness tearing a whimper from her throat. She had always been terrified of flying, even on stable commercial flights. This being tossed around in a metal tube by a winter storm was her worst nightmare. The lights flickered, and the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, sounding tense. "We are hitting some rough air, sir. Please fasten seatbelts." Emily shut her eyes tight, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She felt the blood drain from her face. Suddenly, a warm, large hand covered hers. She opened her eyes to see Adrian unbuckled, leaning across the aisle. His expression was no longer mocking or distant. It was focused, anchoring. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice cutting through the roar of the wind outside. Emily locked eyes with him. The gray steel had softened, revealing a depth of humanity she hadn't expected. "You are safe. My pilots are former military. This machine is built for this. Breathe." He didn't pull his hand away. His thumb rubbed slow, rhythmic circles on the back of her knuckles, a grounding touch that tethered her to reality. For 20 minutes, as the jet bucked and swayed through the violent sky, he did not let go. She found herself leaning toward him, drawn into his orbit, the scent of his cologne, musk, and rain filling her senses. When the turbulence finally subsided and the plane leveled out into the smooth air above the storm clouds, the atmosphere between them had shifted irrevocably. The power dynamic of predator and prey had dissolved into something else, a shared survival. Adrian slowly withdrew his hand, and the loss of his warmth was immediate and jarring. He sat back, adjusting his cuffs, but his eyes lingered on her face. "You are not a good liar, Emily," he said softly, using her name for the first time. "There is no fiancé, there is no diplomat. You are running from something or toward something, but you are doing it alone." Emily looked down at her hands, the ghost of his touch still lingering. "I'm a journalist. I missed my story. I'm broke. I just didn't want you to think I was easy." Adrian was silent for a long moment. Then he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a murmur that sent a shiver down her spine. I do not think you are easy, Emily. I think you are desperate, and desperate people are the most dangerous. The pilot announced their descent into Bucharest. As the plane banked, Emily looked out the window. The city below was a sprawling grid of sodium lights obscured by swirling snow. They weren't heading for the main commercial airport. The jet was descending toward a private airstrip on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by high fences and dark vehicles. As they taxied to a halt, she saw a convoy of black SUVs waiting on the tarmac, men with earpieces and bulges under their jackets standing guard in the snow. This wasn't the welcome committee for a businessman. This was the detail for a king or a warlord. The blast of cold air that hit them when the cabin door opened was shocking, carrying the scent of diesel and frozen earth. Adrian descended the stairs first, his coat billowing in the wind. He offered a hand to Emily, and as she took it, she noticed the way the men on the tarmac stiffened, their eyes scanning the darkness beyond the floodlights. They treated Adrian with a mixture of reverence and terror. One of the men, a burly figure with a scar running down his neck, opened the door of the lead SUV. "Boss, the roads to the city center are impassable," the man said in Romanian, though Emily understood the tone. "We have to go to the estate. It is not safe to be out in the open." Adrian nodded curtly and guided Emily into the back of the armored vehicle. The drive was silent and tense. Emily peered out the tinted windows, watching the bleak, snow-covered landscape pass by. They were driving away from the city lights, climbing into the forested hills that surrounded Bucharest. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "To my home," Adrian replied, not looking at her. He was busy typing on a secure phone, his brow furrowed. "It is the only place I can guarantee your safety tonight. The blizzard has brought out the wolves." She didn't think he was talking about animals. They arrived at a massive iron gate flanked by stone gargoyles. The estate was a sprawling Gothic mansion that looked like it had been carved from the mountain itself, dark and imposing against the white snow. Inside, the house was a paradox of old-world grandeur and modern fortification. The grand foyer featured a double staircase and a crystal chandelier, but Emily noticed the security cameras in every corner and the reinforced steel shutters on the windows. Adrian led her to a massive living room where a fire roared in a stone hearth. He poured himself another drink, his hand shaking slightly, the first sign of weakness she had seen. He stripped off his jacket, tossing it onto a chair, and rolled up his shirt sleeves. It was then that Emily saw the fresh bandage on his forearm, spotted with blood. "You're hurt," she said, stepping forward instinctively. He glanced at his arm dismissively. "It is nothing. A scratch from a disagreement before I left Zurich." Emily, forgetting her fear, reached out and gently took his arm. "Let me see. I have a first aid kit in my bag. I'm used to patching up clumsy photographers." Adrian stiffened at her touch but didn't pull away. As she peeled back the bandage to reveal a graze from a bullet, the reality of who he was slammed into her. "This wasn't a business disagreement. You're not just a businessman, are you?" she whispered, looking up into his steel eyes. He looked down at her, his expression weary. "My family has owned Bucharest for 3 generations. We deal in construction, shipping, and protection. But in this world, protection requires teeth." He paused, his gaze drifting to the fire. "I tried to leave it once. 10 years ago. I married a woman, a civilian like you. I thought I could be clean." He walked to the window, staring out at the storm. "They put a bomb in my car. I was running late. She took the car to go shopping. I watched her die from the balcony. Since then, I do not pretend to be a good man. I am the monster that keeps the other monsters away." Emily's heart broke for the lonely boy hiding inside the ruthless man. She walked over to him, standing just behind him. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't have a fiancé. I had an ex who gambled away my savings and left me with debt collectors. I chased this story to Zurich to try and pay them off. I guess we are both running from ghosts." Adrian turned, his eyes searching hers. The air between them crackled with a sudden, intense electricity. He reached out, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. "You should be afraid of me, Emily." The storm outside raged for 2 days, sealing the estate off from the rest of the world. In that isolation, the barriers between them eroded. They spent the hours talking by the fire, drinking wine from his cellar, and exploring the vast, empty halls of his home. Emily discovered that Adrian was a man of profound intellect. He quoted poetry, played the piano with haunting skill, and possessed a dry, dark humor that made her laugh despite the circumstances. She saw the way he treated his staff, with respect and loyalty, and how they looked at him with devotion, not just fear. He was a king who ruled with a heavy hand because he believed it was the only way to keep order. On the second night, the tension that had been building since the turbulence on the jet finally snapped. They were in the library, the only light coming from the fireplace. Adrian was showing her a rare first edition book, standing so close she could feel the heat radiating from his chest. When she looked up to ask a question, the words died in her throat. He was looking at her mouth with a hunger that was terrifying and exhilarating. He dropped the book. It hit the floor with a thud, and then his hands were in her hair, pulling her to him. The kiss was not gentle. It was a release of years of solitude. Emily met him with equal force, wrapping her arms around his neck, anchoring herself to him. They moved to the leather sofa, the world outside ceasing to exist. For the first time in her life, Emily didn't feel small or invisible. She felt worshipped. But the morning brought the cold light of reality. Emily woke alone in the massive master bed. She found Adrian in his study, surrounded by his lieutenants. The mood was grim. When he saw her, his face shut down, the mask of the mob boss sliding back into place. "You need to leave," he said coldly, not meeting her eyes. "The roads are cleared. My driver will take you to the airport. I have arranged a commercial flight to London and deposited enough money in your account to clear your debts." Emily felt as though he had slapped her. "What, last night?" "Last night was a mistake," he interrupted, his voice like ice. "You are a civilian, a journalist. You do not belong here. The wolves know you are here. They think you are my weakness. I cannot afford weaknesses." He was pushing her away to save her, but the rejection cut deep. Emily's pride, the only thing she had left, flared. "I don't want your money, Adrian, and I don't want your protection if it comes with this coldness." She turned and stormed out, packing her bag with trembling hands. She ignored his driver and called a taxi from the main road, trudging through the snow to the gate. She wanted to be as far away from Adrian Ionescu as possible, but she had underestimated the reach of his enemies. Halfway to the airport, a black van slammed into the side of her taxi, spinning it off the road. The last thing Emily saw before darkness took her was a man in a ski mask prying open her door, a tattoo of a wolf on his hand. Adrian stood on the balcony, watching the car drive away, his heart feeling like a stone in his chest. It was better this way. She would be safe in London, living a normal life far away from the blood and the snow. His phone rang. It was his head of security. "Boss, we found the taxi. It's in a ditch 3 miles out. The girl is gone. The wolves have taken her." The phone cracked in Adrian's grip. A roar of pure, primal rage ripped from his throat, a sound that terrified even his most hardened guards. The mask was gone. The businessman was gone. Only the warlord remained. He did not call for a negotiation. He did not call the police. He called his army. "Get everyone," he ordered, his voice deadly calm. "Burn it all down." He strapped on a Kevlar vest over his dress shirt, loaded 2 magazines into his handgun, and walked out into the snow. The wolves were holding her in an abandoned textile factory in the industrial district. They expected Adrian to bargain, to offer territory or money. They did not expect him to drive an armored truck through the front wall of the building. The ensuing firefight was short and brutal. Adrian moved through the smoke and debris like a wraith, dropping men with precise, lethal shots. He didn't care about his empire, his reputation, or his life. He only cared about the woman tied to a chair in the center of the warehouse. When he kicked open the door to the office where the leader of the wolves was holding a gun to Emily's head, Adrian didn't hesitate. He took the shot, the bullet striking the man between the eyes before he could even flinch. Adrian rushed to Emily, cutting her bonds, checking her frantically for injuries. She was bruised and terrified, but alive. She clung to him, burying her face in his chest, sobbing. "I came back," he whispered into her hair, rocking her back and forth. "I will always come back." In the aftermath, as the police sirens wailed in the distance, paid to arrive late, Adrian walked Emily out of the ruins. The snow had stopped falling. He looked at her, his face streaked with soot and blood. "I cannot let you go," he said, his voice raw. "I tried. I failed. But I cannot live this life anymore if it means putting you in danger. I will dismantle the illegal operations. It will take time and it will be dangerous, but I will make the business legitimate, fully legitimate. I will be just a CEO, if you will have me." Emily reached up, wiping a smear of blood from his cheek. She saw the man who had held her hand during the turbulence, the man who played the piano, the man who had walked into hell to save her. "I don't want a CEO," she said, kissing him softly. "I just want you, but you have to promise me no more secrets, and no more running." Adrian kissed her hand, bowing his head over her fingers. "I promise." 1 year later. The sun glinted off the fuselage of the Gulfstream as it climbed into the clear blue sky above Bucharest. Inside, the cabin was warm and filled with light. Emily sat in the cream leather chair, reviewing the final proofs of her book, a biography of the changing political landscape of Eastern Europe. Across from her, Adrian was reading a financial report, his glasses perched on his nose. He looked younger, the weight of the underworld lifted from his shoulders. He looked up, catching her staring. "What is it?" he asked, a smile touching his lips. Emily smiled back, reaching across the aisle, just thinking about the blizzard. Adrian took her hand, his thumb rubbing her knuckles, a habit he had never broken. "I hate the snow," he murmured, leaning over to kiss her. "But I am very fond of airports." The jet banked toward the west, carrying them toward a future that was open, clear, and finally safe.